Hey YouTubers, today I'm going to talk to you about my 1936 Ziess Ikon Super Ikomat. This is a model 530-16, and the best I can tell, the 16 denotes a 6x6 image shot on 120 roll film. This is my first vintage medium format camera, and at $120 shipped, it was by far my most expensive. Now, of course, that's cheap compared to a modern medium format camera, unless, of course, we're talking about a Holga. But if you look at this baby, this ain't no Holga. Now, think back to 1936 when this was a brand new camera sitting in a camera shop somewhere. The Olympics were in Berlin, where Jesse Owens shocked Hitler's Nazi Germany by winning the 100-meter dash. It was the start of the Spanish Civil War, and the novel Gone with the Wind was first published. Let's take a look at this amazing piece of German engineering. This is a rangefinder camera, so you don't have to measure the distance to your subject like you did with other cameras of this era. Now, the way this rangefinder works is actually rather ingenious. You look through this tiny viewfinder on the right to see your subject. There are two windows on the front that give a split view. One view is amplified through this small lens that happens to be on the same plane as the taking lens. If your subject is out of focus, you will see a double image. You turn this tiny notched wheel to turn the focus ring on the camera until the double image becomes one. The tiny viewfinder is really dim and very difficult to see through. I find it very difficult to focus. And so what I've discovered is that if I try to focus on something that is a vertical line or a hard line, it makes it a little easier. But faces are pretty hard to focus on, which is what you would want to do in an up-close situation. I did discover that the minimum focus distance of this camera is about 4.5 feet. If I wanted to get closer, I would need to use a diopter. But of course, if I put a diopter on here, I basically ruin the ability to use the rangefinder because you'll have to do calculations then to determine what your focus range is. So I haven't tried that yet. I'll try that later. I will be checking the accuracy of the rangefinder using a piece of ground glass and a focus chart, but that will be in a future video. The optics in this lens are the best Zeiss had to offer in 1936. It is a Tessar 80mm f2.8 by Carl Zeiss Jena. This lens is sharp. I will post some images at the end of the video. This camera also has the top of the line Compur rapid shutter that is still accurate 83 years later. The shutter runs from 1 second to 1/400th of a second. It also has a bulb setting. It even comes with a timer for shooting those family photos so Dad can get in the picture too. That's pretty impressive for 1936. Like I said, this was state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line quality. Several online sources state that this camera sold for over $200 in 1936. That's the equivalency of about $4,000 today, kind of like buying your Canon 5D Mark III. This was the premier camera for a portable pocket-sized medium format camera in 1936. Alright, so let's take a picture. Now, this camera does not come with a light meter, so you'll have to meter your light with something else. I like to use an app on my phone, but you can use any light meter that'll give you a reading. Okay, once you take your meter, you'll go ahead and set your aperture and your shutter speed. Once I've done that and I've focused, I'm ready to take a picture. But nothing's happening. Well, that's because on these old cameras, you've got to cock the shutter right here. So once the shutter's cocked, it loads the spring and it's ready to go. I set my aperture by moving this dial so the little black line lines up with the desired aperture setting. I set my shutter speed moving this other dial. It takes a little effort to set it to 1/400th because an extra spring is engaged to get the faster speed. These shutters are different from the shutters on your old 35 SLR. Instead of a curtain, it is a diaphragm, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, now it's time to load some film. This camera is a bit quirky when it comes to how it handles the spacing of the shots. I've read from several sources on the internet that the Zeiss Ikon cameras from this era have a sophisticated double exposure prevention system. It is precisely engineered to make it foolproof for the shooter. The problem is that modern 120 film is slightly thinner than the film this camera was designed for. This foils the highly calibrated film advance system, causing overlapping exposures, which is a bummer. Now, I personally didn't experience this, and in fact, using Arista 100 and Fomapan 100, I noticed that the shots were spaced just right. So your mileage may vary. One issue for sure is that the red sight glass on the back is positioned for 6x9, so it is completely useless beyond setting up the first shot on the 6x6 camera. They must have used a completely different numbering convention back in 1936. These are the challenges and part of the fun of learning to shoot a vintage camera. So my final thoughts? I absolutely love this camera. It's a precise instrument that's been manufactured to stand the test of time. It's not just heavy, it's solid, and it's refined like a Swiss watch. All the fittings and all the movements are just as tight and precise today as they were 83 years ago. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe and maybe share with your friends. And as always, I would love to see some comments down below. And then thanks again, and until next time, see you around.